Okay, today we are going to learn about scatter plots. I am going to go through the notes on here, and you have them on your worksheet, so make sure to follow along. The actual definition of a scatter plot is a graph of discrete points of data, usually collected through an experiment or through research. Remember that discrete means not connected. So, normally we have a graph that has a line through it. A scatter plot means those points are not going to be connected. They are discrete. Okay? So, normally that scatter plot is done only in quadrant 1 because most of the time it is taken from an experiment. And when you are counting things, you very rarely have negatives. So if I'm counting people, it's only going to be positives. So we only work in quadrant 1 because that's the part that's positive and positive. But occasionally you will have scatter plots that have negative numbers. Why do we use scatter plots? Well, scatter plots, as I said before, are usually used to show the data from experiments or research. Experiments and research show us true life, okay? It's not perfect. Real life is not perfect. So it's not going to fall in a straight, exact line every time. If you haven't learned it yet, in science, when you're doing experiments, you will. There's things like human error or just things that don't fall in a straight line, that affect experiments, that make them have what we call outliers, which are the points that aren't in a perfect line. So a scatter plot helps us to see what's going to happen, but not necessarily in a perfect world, okay? But what the scatter plot does is it shows patterns or trends in data. It shows us that pattern that generally, as you get older, you get taller, at least until you stop growing. It isn't perfect, but it helps us to predict what happens. We know that there's a good chance that somewhere in an area is where your answer will be. There are 3 types of scatter plots. The first type is a positive correlation. Correlation means association, how they are related. Okay, so a positive correlation means that as our x's are going up, our y's are also going up. Remember, this is 0, and our x's get bigger as we go to the right. In a positive correlation, that means as our x's get bigger, going this way, then our y's are going to get bigger. So what we end up with is a graph that looks like it's going up. That means positive. So if you can remember positive equals up, then that will help you remember that. Is a negative correlation. That means as our x's get bigger, x's are getting bigger this way, because remember this is 0. As our x's are getting bigger, our y's are going down. So that shows a negative correlation. The third type is when there is no correlation at all. Okay? There isn't a trend. So dots are everywhere. If there is no pattern, then your answer is no correlation. When you take your STAR test or when you take a test in here, they're always going to give you that says no relationship. I can tell you, as long as we're talking about scatter plots, okay, no relationship is never, ever the answer. I want you guys to write that down and then put a big X through it. It is never the answer. Okay? Why that is because if it is on a graph, then there is a relationship. okay? There might not be a trend, there might not be a correlation, but there is a relationship, okay? So no relationship is never, ever, ever the answer that you should pick. So that should help you narrow down your answer choices. Okay, so when we have has a positive or negative correlation, we can draw something that's called a line of best fit. The line of best fit is a line that's used to model the pattern in a set of data, okay? It's kind of the average. It is, we know that it's not going to be right 100% of the time, but if we want to make an educated guess, it's a good guess of what's going to happen. So you can either draw this by hand, which we're going to do, or you can use something that's called a linear regression tool on the calculator. We're not going to learn how to do that. We will just draw it by hand and find a line of best fit. So here's a good example of a negative correlation on a quadrant 1 graph, and we are going to draw a line of best fit here. So easiest way to do this, on your paper, if you have a graph and you're trying to figure out a line of best fit, you just kind of eyeball it and make sure that you have some points that are higher and some points that are lower. So if I start right about here and go through that, I have some on top, I have some on bottom, so it goes through the middle. You can kind of adjust it however you want. It's going to be an opinion, okay? It's a guess. But there is still a wrong answer. This would be a good estimate, what's on the screen, okay? What would not be a good estimate is this. This is not a line of best fit, okay? All of my data points are below that line. That's not a good estimate. Also not a good estimate. If I were to draw this line of best fit in the wrong direction, not a good estimate, okay? So when we look at these and when we grade them, we are taking into account that it is an estimate, it's a guess, okay? So I'm not looking for perfection here, but I need you to understand that it needs to be close, and I need you to show me that you understand the concept of what a line of best fit is, okay? We will also be learning how to do this on the calculator, and that is next. If you will turn to the page that says Guided Practice Scatter Plots, we will start looking at how to do this on the calculator. Okay, you should already be signed into your calculator, and you will receive a file. You're going to click Open. That file will open, and it's going to be called Scatter Plots. So when you open this, you will see your file is Scatter Plots, and that you have multiple problems. We're going to start with problem number 1, and I've already put the graphs in there for you. All you will need to do is enter the scatter plots. We're going to enter this the same way as we did the scatter plots on the By the Sea worksheet. So if you need to flip back to look at those instructions, you can do that, but I'm going to go through it here with you too. So we are going to go to Menu, Graph Entry Edit, which is number 3. You can just hit number 3. And then you can either scroll down or just hit number 5 to go to scatter plots. Remember, when we have a scatter plot, we have to enter our x's and our y's separately, and we have to do those in brackets. So we're going to hit Control, close parenthesis to get those brackets. And then we're going to type in all of our x numbers. So we have 0, 3, 6, 8, and 12. And we need to make sure that there's commas in between those numbers. We need to enter them in the same order that they're given to us so we don't get confused. Then we'll do our y's in the same way. For number 1, that's 7.5, 5.5, 3.5, 1.5, and 0. So make sure that you get all of those entered in with commas in between. And then we're going to hit enter. Okay, what you have on your screen is a picture of all 4 quadrants. And as you can see, I can see some of my data points. They're right here. Yours should look the same. I need to see all of my data points. Okay, so we're going to zoom out in order to do that. There's a couple of different ways to do that. I know that all of my points are in quadrant 1. How do I know that? My x's and my y's are all positive. So I know they're all going to be over here in this quadrant. Your calculator has a special way of zooming in just on that quadrant. So if you will hit menu, number 4 for window zoom, and then if you look at number 6, it says quadrant 1. I can do that and it's going to zoom out to just see the beginning of quadrant 1. Now I can see all my data points. Okay, it's easier than hitting zoom out a couple of times to get to where you need to be. Now we're going to draw our line of best fit. So I'm going to go to menu, number 8 for geometry, because a line is part of geometry. We're going to go to number 1 for points and lines, and then we're going to go to number 5 for line segment. You could also do a line here, but it's easier to move the line segment around when you're trying to figure out where you want your line of best fit. So now I'm going to click where I think I want it to start, and then I'm going to drag with my finger on the click pad until I get to where I want it to end. And I'll click again to put my end point down. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Just kind of make a guess of where you want it to be, all in between your points. Okay, so I clicked and it's going to draw my line for me. And then if I decide that's not quite where I want it to be, that's okay. I just need to hit escape so that that little pencil goes away. And I'm going to take my cursor and go to one of the endpoints of the line segment. And if you hold the middle button down on your click pad, the hand will close and you can move that line back and forth. Okay? When you're ready to drop it, you just click it again. So once you get it to where you need it to be, click the center button again, and you'll drop the point where you need it to be. It is hard to get used to when you're not used to moving those lines. Do the best job you can, make the effort, and show me that you understand what you're doing. So I'm going to drop the point right there, and there's my line of best fit. Okay, as you can see, this is a line of best fit because what I did was I took an average of where my points are. I have some points that are below, I have some points that are above, okay, and it kind of goes through the middle of all of them. Do the best job you can. It's not going to be exact, okay, and this is not something that you should spend 20 minutes on for each one. Do your best and then move on to the next one. Okay, so when you are ready, turn the page by hitting Control and to the right on your click pad, and you can click at the 2.1 at the top to change the page, and we'll start number 2. So we're going to do number 2 exactly the same way. We're going to hit Menu, 3 for Graph Entry Edit, and 5 for Scatter Plot. You're going to type your X values in. Make sure to put them in those brackets. If you don't put them in brackets, it'll give you an error. Okay? What's on the screen are not brackets. I hit the wrong button. So I'm just going to erase them, and then make sure to hit Control and the close parentheses button to undo those and give myself the curly brackets. Okay, so our X values for number 2 are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will type those in. And then we'll do our Y values, same way. Make sure you put your brackets in. Notice I don't need to close my brackets. They're already closed. Okay? You can hit it again. It will close them, but it's just a waste of time. They're already closed. You can just move on to the next one. So my Y values are 0.67, 0.33, 2, 2.67, 4, and 4.67. So after you get those entered, we can look at them and once again see that those values are all positive. So we're going to have our data in quadrant 1. I can see all my points here, but it's going to be easier to draw a line of best fit if you're zoomed in. So once again, I'm going to zoom in to my quadrant 1 by hitting Menu, 4 for Window Zoom, and 6 for quadrant 1. And it's just going to kind of make those dots bigger so it's easier to make a line of best fit. Okay? If you still want to zoom in more, that's fine. You can just click Zoom in, and it will zoom in and make those dots bigger. So now I'm going to do my line of best fit. If you are not sure about the points that you put in, you can click Control G, and it'll bring your points back up. My dots look funny, so I'm going to go in and double check my table, make sure I put them in right. And I did. But if you didn't, if you messed it up, it's fine. You can just go and delete that one point out and put it back in, change it. But it's always good to double check your work. Now I'm going to do my line of best fit. So I will do Menu, 8 for Geometry, 1 for Points and Lines, and then once again we're going to do a line segment, so that's number 5. And we're going to start, it doesn't matter where you start. You can start down by the origin or you can start up at the top, whatever's easier for you. I'll draw my line of best fit, kind of eyeball it at first. Remember, you can always move it. Okay, so draw it through where you want to, and then you can pick up each of your points and move it. Make sure before you try to move it that you hit Escape to get out of that line drawing tool, otherwise you're just going to draw another line. Remember, if you mess up too, if you need to undo something, it's just Control Escape to undo. So I'm going to move this line of best fit so it's a little more in between my lines. Now I have some on top of that line and I have some on bottom of that line, and they're kind of equal distance from the line. I have these two right here that are close, I have these two right here that are close, and then I'm splitting these in the middle. Okay? So let's look at number 3. Control to the right again to get to problem number 3, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to put our data points in. And in this case, we don't have a table. They're written as a set of points. That's fine. You know the first number is your x's in each parentheses. So we're going to do 4, 7, 12, 18, 20, and 30. Make sure not to get your x's and y's confused. If you need to rewrite those points in a table, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. They just need to stay in order. Then we're going to do the second number in each set of parentheses, and that's going to be 12, 18.5, 29, 42, 45.5, and 66. Okay, we're going to hit enter. I can't see any of my dots. So what we need to look at, I want you to look at your data real quick. Those numbers are bigger, okay, than what we have been using. They go all the way up to 66. You have the option of zooming in on quadrant 1 again. If you do that, if you zoom in on quadrant 1, you're not going to be able to see all your data points because some of them are pretty far spread out. Okay, our lowest y is 12. Our biggest y is 66. If you notice right here, when I zoomed into quadrant 1, my biggest y on this graph is 13.3. That's why I can only see 1 point. The only point I can see is that 412. Okay, I need to see all my points. So what do? Well, we need to zoom in a different way. So I'm going to go to 4 for zoom, and then I'm going to go down to number 9 for data. And what this does is the calculator knows where your points are. It's going to zoom in so you can see all your points. So it'll zoom to the right place to see all that. This works especially well if you're using it for scatter plots. Now I can see all my points. I had 6 points on the paper. I have 6 points on my screen. It looks good. I know I can draw my line of best fit now. I'll do that the same way by going to Menu, 8 for Geometry, 1 for Points and Lines, and then 5 for Line Segment. If you're too close to the edge, if you have a problem drawing that line, you can zoom out a little bit and just click in the center of the screen and it will zoom out just a little bit. It's a personal choice about how you want to have it on your screen, if it's easier for you to draw. As you can see, I'm having a little trouble there at the edge. I might need to zoom out, but I think I'm okay. So, I'm going to draw my line of best fit, trying to get to where I go through some of the lines where I have some on the top, some on the bottom. They're all pretty close. Okay? I feel pretty good about that line. We can go on to the next one. Line number 4. I'm sorry, problem number 4. So, graph entry edit, scatter plot, and you put in your points. Make sure that your x's are the first number in each set of parentheses. It's easy to get them mixed up when it's a set of data points like that instead of in a table. Notice that my numbers here are not in numerical order. Okay, we're starting high and going low. That's fine. The order of the numbers doesn't matter as long as you put them in how they're given to you. We want the first number 12 to be with our first y, which is 8.5. So we need to make sure that those are put together Otherwise, your calculator doesn't know which x's go with which y's. So I put my points in, I hit enter. Once again, I can't see them because they're too big. It's off my screen. So I'm going to zoom again. I'm going to zoom to data this time, just because I remember that we only went to a certain number. If you just want to zoom to data every time, that's fine. You can just do different options however you want to do it. There's all my points. I had 6 points on the paper, 6 points on the graph. So now I'm going to draw my line. Menu, 8 for geometry, 1 for points and lines, 5 for line segment. And then I'll draw a line of best fit. Once again, some of my data points are kind of close to the edge of the screen. If you need to zoom out a little bit so that you have some more room, do that. I just wouldn't make it so small that you have problems getting in between your lines. Okay? This one's, we have a couple of outliers. That's what we call the points that are further outside the line, like this one. Okay, they're not as close together. That's okay. I'm still going to eyeball it, make a good estimate, and then you're done. Make sure to follow these steps as you go through for your independent practice. And we're going to do the independent practice the exact same way. You're just going to do it on your own.